You just heard it straight from one of the most connected insiders in the entire NFL media landscape, sitting up there on national television telling you flat out that Maxx Crosby could get traded again, that the whole saga is not dead, that the phone lines in Las Vegas have not gone cold, and that the Chicago Bears might be the team that actually makes it happen. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Fave, this is Favs, and if you thought the Maxx Crosby story was finished, if you thought we closed that chapter back in March when the Baltimore Ravens pulled out of the deal and everybody went home crying, then I need you to understand something right now. The monster never died. It went underground. It went quiet for a couple of months while people were distracted by the draft and free agency and all the other noise, and now it has clawed its way back to the surface with a vengeance. Because this week, the language being used around Maxx Crosby and potential suitors is not mildly interested. It is not keeping tabs. The phrase that is being deployed by one of the most plugged-in Raiders insiders in the business is nuclear hot. Two NFC powerhouses described as nuclear hot on the best pass rusher the Silver and Black have had in a generation, and a Bears subplot sitting underneath all of it that every Chicago fan needs to be paying attention to. We are going deep today. Strap in. Let me take you back to the beginning of this story because context is everything, and some of you may have missed the original chapter. Maxx Crosby, 5-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro, the most disruptive defensive player the Las Vegas Raiders have had since the franchise moved to Nevada, was literally hours away from becoming a Baltimore Raven earlier this offseason. The Raiders and Ravens reached an agreement, a real, legitimate, done deal kind of agreement. Las Vegas was going to send Crosby to Baltimore in exchange for first-round picks in 2026 and 2027, including the 14th overall selection in this year's draft, 2 first-round picks. That was the price. That was the package. That was what Maxx Crosby was worth on the open market when 2 front offices sat down and shook hands on a number, and it was done. It was agreed upon. And then this is where it gets absolutely cinematic. Baltimore backed out. The Ravens pulled the plug after Crosby failed his physical, with medical concerns surfacing around the torn meniscus repair he had undergone in January of this year. A knee. The whole blockbuster fell apart because of a knee. Maxx Crosby, who had mentally and emotionally prepared himself to leave the only NFL home he had ever known, had to turn around, walk back through the doors at Allegiant Stadium, and figure out how to make peace with an outcome he never saw coming. That is a soap opera. That is the kind of storyline that belongs in a prestige television drama, not a real professional football offseason. But here we are. Now, in the immediate aftermath of that collapse, both sides did what organizations and players always do when something messy and public goes sideways. They managed the narrative. The Raiders started telling people that they never really wanted to trade Crosby in the first place, that it was Crosby who had wanted out, and that now that he was back, he was staying. Per a league source close to the situation after the Baltimore deal collapsed, the Raiders were actively telling teams that Crosby would not be traded. Done. Final. Move on. And Crosby himself leaned into that story. He started doing the press circuit with all the right talking points. Everything happens for a reason. Vegas is where I'm supposed to be. I believe in this team. I believe in this coaching staff. I believe in Fernando Mendoza, the rookie quarterback the Raiders selected with the first overall pick in this year's draft. And look, I am not here to call Maxx Crosby a liar. I genuinely think he meant every word of it in the moment. When you go through something that disruptive and that public, you find a way to make peace with where you landed. You tell yourself the story that gets you back on the field with your head right. I understand that. But here is what I need every single person watching this video to understand about professional football, because people keep mixing up emotions and business like they are the same thing. They are not. They have never been. The Raiders are a franchise in the middle of a rebuild. They have a brand new head coach in Clint Kubiak. They have a rookie quarterback starting from day one. They are, by most honest assessments of the roster, probably not competing for a Super Bowl in 2026. That is not an insult. That is just the reality of where that franchise is in its cycle. And Maxx Crosby is about to turn 29 years old. He has arguably 2 to 4 elite years remaining at the level he has been playing. The Raiders do not owe him a contender. And equally important, and this is the part people keep forgetting, Crosby does not get to tell the Raiders what to do with him contractually. If Las Vegas decides that the best move for the long-term health of their franchise is to trade their best player for a haul of premium draft capital, they are going to do that. Feelings and public statements do not override business logic when the offer is right. That is how this league has always operated. So now it is June. We are in the dead zone of the NFL offseason. Nothing going on. Training camp still weeks away. The preseason a distant light at the end of a very long tunnel. And this is when it starts back up. Raiders insider Hondo Carpenter, who covers the team for Sports Illustrated, went public on his podcast and said something that immediately got the entire league's attention. He said, and I want to be very precise here because the language matters, that there is a lot of interest in Maxx Crosby right now, and that two teams specifically are, his word, nuclear hot on the Raiders' star pass rusher. Those two teams, the Philadelphia Eagles and the San Francisco 49ers. Nuclear hot from a guy who, by his own admission, was the one breaking Crosby trade rumors before the Baltimore deal materialized, who was mocked and threatened by fans who didn't believe him, and then watched the deal actually happen and get announced. So when this man says nuclear hot, you listen. You do not dismiss it. You pay attention. Let me break down why each of these teams makes terrifying sense, because when you look at their specific situations, the hunger for a player like Crosby is not just understandable, it is almost desperate. Start with San Francisco. The 49ers finished the 2025 season with an NFL low 20 sacks as a team. 20 sacks. As a franchise that has historically been built on a dominant, physical, menacing defensive front, finishing dead last in the entire league in sacks is an organizational embarrassment. Their star edge rusher, Nick Bosa, is coming back from a torn ACL. Their first-round pick from last year, Michael Williams, is also rehabbing a knee injury of his own. So you have a team that already couldn't get to the quarterback, and now their two most important pass rushers are both question marks heading into the season. A healthy, fully recovered Maxx Crosby plugged into that defensive line does not just improve the 49ers, it transforms them. It takes a unit that was historically bad at getting after the quarterback last year and turns it into arguably the most frightening defensive front in the NFC. Pairing Crosby with a healthy returning Bosa gives opposing offensive lines a nightmare they cannot solve with conventional blocking schemes. That is not an exaggeration. That is what elite edge rush duos do to offenses. Fave's personal opinion on the 49ers, they need this more than they are publicly letting on. 20 sacks is not a "we're close, we just need a piece or two" number. That is an "our pass rush is broken and we know it" number. John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are smart enough to recognize that. And they are smart enough to recognize that Maxx Crosby, healthy and motivated heading into his age 29 season, is exactly the kind of transformative acquisition that could take a roster that has been knocking on the Super Bowl door for years and finally kick it down. The 49ers have been agonizingly close multiple times. They know what it costs to not have that final piece. Crosby might be that piece. Now, a 49ers insider did pump the brakes on the immediacy of this situation, making the point that while nobody is denying San Francisco's interest, acting like something is imminent in mid-June would be misleading. And that is a fair point. The 49ers thinking, from what has been reported, is that they want to wait until the season starts and they have a clearer picture of what they need to make a run before committing to the kind of deal it takes to land Crosby. They want to see him play. They want to see the knee hold up under game conditions. That is the rational approach. That is the cautious approach. And honestly, after what happened to Baltimore, every team in the league has learned a lesson about moving too fast on this particular player. But Philadelphia operates differently. Howie Roseman does not do cautious. Howie Roseman has never once in his career looked at an opportunity to improve his roster and said, you know what, let's wait and see how the season plays out. What has been reported around the Eagles is that even though they may not have a desperate, obvious need at pass rusher on the surface, they did add Jonathan Greenard in free agency. They have bodies on that defensive line. Roseman is never satisfied. The man is constitutionally incapable of looking at his roster and saying it is good enough. And the reason Philadelphia is willing to go nuclear hot on a player they may not technically need right now is the same reason the 49ers are motivated. The Los Angeles Rams just traded for Myles Garrett. Stop and think about what that trade means for the NFC power structure. The Rams, who were already a legitimate Super Bowl contender, went out and acquired arguably the best defensive player in football. That single move changed the entire calculus of the conference. If you are the Eagles, if you are the 49ers, if you are any team with real aspirations in the NFC, you cannot just sit there and watch the Rams add Myles Garrett without asking yourself what aggressive move you are going to make in response. The Myles Garrett trade did more to resurrect the Maxx Crosby trade conversation than anything else that has happened this offseason. It lit a fire under every front office in the conference. It told the NFC that the arms race is on, and if you are not willing to go get a game-changing player, you are going to be watching the Rams celebrate in February. Dave's honest assessment of the Eagles specifically, I would not sleep on Howie Roseman making this call. The one thing that makes it complicated is the contract. Crosby is owed roughly $59 million over the next 2 seasons, with his $29 million salary now fully guaranteed in 2027. Any team acquiring him has to absorb that contract and surrender premium draft capital at the same time. For the Eagles, who freed up significant capital in the A.J. Brown trade, the picks exist. The financial flexibility can be navigated, and a package built around 2027 and 2028 first-round picks is the kind of offer that realistically gets a deal done. Is it expensive? Absolutely. Is it worth it if it means staying ahead of the Rams in the NFC? Roseman would argue yes, without blinking. Now let's talk about where the Bears actually fit into all of this, because this is Favs, and we always come back to Chicago. And what has emerged from the reporting over the past few weeks is something that should genuinely excite Bears fans who have been watching this team try to build around Caleb Williams. Mike Florio, NBC Sports' most plugged-in NFL insider, a man who has been around this league for decades and whose information is consistently respected, went public with his read on the Crosby situation and specifically invoked the Bears. He said directly that he is still keeping an eye on the possibility of Crosby being traded, that teams are actively looking for pass rushers, and then he said something that I think got lost in the noise a little bit. He said it could be presented to Crosby at some point by Las Vegas. Hey, Max, we know you want to stay here, but the Bears are making us an offer that we're not inclined to refuse. And Florio went further. He said he thinks it would be easier for Maxx Crosby to talk himself into going from the Raiders to the Bears than it was for Jared Verse to talk himself into going from the Rams to the Browns. Read that twice. The comp Florio is using for a psychologically difficult trade destination, a player leaving a rebuilt contender to go to a rebuilding team, is Jared Verse. And his argument is that the Bears would be an easier sell for Crosby than the Browns were for Verse. That is a significant statement about how the NFL views the trajectory of this Chicago team right now. And it is not just Florio pointing at the Bears. ESPN's Dan Graziano, another one of the most well-sourced reporters covering the league, specifically named the Cowboys, Bills, Bears, and Patriots as 4 teams that could show legitimate interest in Crosby if Las Vegas enters sell mode near the November trade deadline. 2 of the most credible NFL journalists in the business have independently named Chicago as a real player in this conversation. That is not a coincidence. That is the league talking. That is sources inside organizations telling reporters that Chicago is a destination worth monitoring. And Ryan Poles himself has already confirmed the Bears checked in on Crosby earlier this offseason. The groundwork is not hypothetical. The interest is documented. The relationship between these 2 front offices exists. So let me give you Fave's complete picture of what a Maxx Crosby trade to Chicago would actually look like and why it makes football sense beyond just the headlines. The Chicago Bears in 2026 are a team with a genuine franchise quarterback in Caleb Williams. They have built their offense around him. They have skill position weapons. They have an offensive line that is improving. The identity of this team is taking shape, but the thing that has kept the Bears from being taken seriously as a legitimate NFC North contender, and I have been saying this for a while now, is the absence of a singular, terrifying pass rusher, a player who forces opposing offensive coordinators to redesign their entire game plan, a player who quarterbacks lie awake at night thinking about. The Bears do not have that player right now. They have good defensive players, they have capable players, but they do not have a Maxx Crosby, and there is a reason the teams that consistently win in this league, the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Eagles in their Super Bowl runs, have had elite edge rushers. You cannot win at the highest level without one. That is not an opinion. That is a pattern established over decades of championship football. Crosby, for his career, has accumulated 69.5 sacks, 278 solo tackles, 133 tackles for loss, and 164 quarterback hits across 110 games. And last season, when he was playing on a torn meniscus, when his knee was literally compromised and he was managing through surgery-level pain, he still put up 53 total pressures, 10 sacks, 31 hurries, 12 quarterback hits, and a forced fumble while playing almost every defensive snap the Raiders had. He did that on a broken knee. Imagine what that looks like fully healthy. Imagine what that looks like on a defense built around Dennis Allen's scheme with Caleb Williams controlling games on the other side of the ball. A Bears team that can score and can wreck quarterbacks is a Bears team that wins the NFC North and goes deep in January. That is not a fantasy. That is a blueprint. Now, I want to address the price question honestly because I am not here to oversell anything or pretend the cost is not real. The Ravens were prepared to send 2 first-round picks for Crosby. That was the established market value before the physical fell apart. The Raiders are not going to take a dramatically lesser offer just because the Baltimore deal collapsed. If anything, They have leverage in the sense that Crosby is now recovered further, and if he comes out of training camp looking explosive and healthy, his value does not drop. It might actually go back up. So if we are being realistic, any serious Bears offer for Maxx Crosby probably starts with a first-round pick and needs additional capital, a second-round pick, a third-round pick, a player, some combination. That is a real price. That is a meaningful price. And the question Ryan Poles has to answer is whether giving up that kind of package for a 29-year-old pass rusher recovering from a torn meniscus is the move that makes the Bears a contender right now. Fave's answer, if you want it, yes. If this team is sitting at 5-2 or 6-2 at the trade deadline and Maxx Crosby is on the market, you do it. You pick up the phone and you make the deal, because the window for a team to win with a franchise quarterback is not infinite, and you do not waste Caleb Williams' years being cautious. The medical question is the one that everybody is dancing around, and I want to address it directly because I think people are overcorrecting in the wrong direction. The failed Baltimore physical happened in March, roughly 2 months after Crosby's meniscus surgery. Of course, he did not pass a physical in March. Of course, there were medical concerns in March. He was 2 months out of a procedure on a major joint. But the NFL trade deadline is in November. By November, Crosby will have been recovering for nearly a full calendar year. He will have gone through training camp, preseason games, and a significant chunk of the regular season. If he is healthy enough to be playing at his normal level by week 8 or 9, and everything he has said publicly suggests he expects to be, then a team evaluating him in October is looking at a completely different medical picture than Baltimore was looking at in March. Chris Sims of NBC Sports made exactly this point, noting that he does not expect teams to get serious about a Crosby trade until they can see him play and verify the health with their own eyes. That is the right read. August and September are the audition. If Crosby looks like Crosby on a football field, the bidding war begins in October, and Crosby himself has been sending signals that suggest his recovery is going well. He said publicly that he is real close to being back, that he sometimes forgets he is injured, and that his biggest battle is remembering to take it easy when his body wants to go full speed. That is not the language of a player who is worried about his knee. That is the language of a player who is chomping at the bit to get back on the field